Hey there, magical experimenters. Taylor Ellwood here, and today's topic is all about how to accept and work through uncomfortable emotions. It's an important part of inner alchemy and internal work because we live with those emotions each day of our lives, and so we have to learn how to work through them. Now, if you're watching this video, go ahead and like it and pop a comment in if you feel like you're so inclined or moved. And if you're just a first time person, go ahead and click the subscribe and notifications bell. So that way you get more videos. So emotions that are uncomfortable, like fear and depression and misery and unhappiness. I mean, these are things that we all deal with, but we don't always deal with them very well. I mean, sometimes we try to run from them. Sometimes we slip into addictions in order to avoid them. And sometimes we do other things. Um, I, because of my recent divorce and because of the last few months, I've kind of had to sit full throttle with a lot of uncomfortable emotions. And I'm used to it. I mean, there was a period of time in 2017 and 2018 I woke up in fear every single day. Um, that was a very comfortable feeling, I'll tell you. And it's kind of similar right now. Only what I'm waking up with right now a lot of times is fear. Sometimes it's depression and misery about things that I'm dealing with. And it's interesting because I've kind of had the opportunity to see how I process things and like what happens when I project that stuff onto other things. So, I'd gotten myself set up with this. It was an okay job. It wasn't perfect or anything. And there were some issues there anyway. But I ended up projecting a lot of my misery and unhappiness onto that job instead of really recognizing and owning it myself. And so I ended up leaving that job. And then this last week, I've been doing DoorDash again. And I'm like, I feel just as miserable and unhappy doing this as I did that job. So needless to say, I started applying for stuff again. I've already gotten a few interviews, and I mean, I will have something new shortly. But it illustrated something for me. It illustrated how easy it is to project to project, that you can find a solution or something externally when really it's got to be internally. And the same thing is like how easily you can say, well, I'm miserable because of X, Y, and Z. And I'm not saying that there isn't some truth to that. I mean, if you're in a job that you don't like, that is a reality for a lot of people. You can end up legitimately feeling good about leaving that job and think, okay, that's solved all my problems. But then you end up discovering like a few days later, well, no, it really hasn't solved all my problems. It's just made me very aware of the fact that, I still have these issues. And this is what I think happens for a lot of people. It certainly has happened for me. I own it. Is that, a lot of times we slip into this notion that if we just change this one thing in our lives, everything is going to be better. Well, that's not true. I mean, sometimes you're going to make decisions and you're going to realize that your life doesn't change all that much regardless. Now I can say, some people might say, well, then Taylor, what does that say about like you getting your divorce? And I can say, well, that was the right decision to make. It was a hard decision to make. I didn't want to make it. But waking up and not feeling like a prisoner in my own home every day and not feeling like I'm being treated like a piece of shit every day is priceless. I can't even begin to tell you how that feels. Um, and that's not a feeling that's changed. I mean, I actually feel welcomed in the home that I'm in. I mean, I'm not going to be here forever, but my friend has also made it very clear. She's like, I'm not going to kick you out. You've got a place to stay while you sort things out. Don't stress it too much. And I have stressed it a bit, not because of her or anything else, but just because I'm me. But I think that like this is a good example of where, you can get really caught up in this notion of if I can just escape these feelings, then things will change. And sometimes it's true. Like getting the divorce did change certain things for me. And for the most part, they're good things. I mean, I still miss my ex-wife. I still think about her a lot. I hope she's happy and doing well. Probably not, because we're both dealing with divorce, and that takes a while to work through. But I hope she finds some happiness. But regardless, I mean, I've done what I've done because I needed to take care of myself, and I didn't want to feel like a prisoner in my own home anymore. I didn't want to feel like I had to carefully look outside in the hallway and see if I was allowed to come out. Because heavens forbid I run into one of the stepkids and they get ticked off because, oh no, there he is, the person they don't like. Now though, I got this job, and I don't know, I was happy to leave DoorDash to get the job. But then I started to sabotage myself in some ways. And I kind of think I needed to. I needed to go crazy for a while. So I don't think it's a reflection on. I think part of it was just it was bad timing. I got my divorce papers around the same time I started that job. If I had to do it over again, what I would have done is I would have waited until about now to apply for jobs instead of applying when I did, because I would have gotten the divorce papers and I would have been able to go crazy for a while without it affecting anything other than me. But in this case, I started this job around the same time I got those divorce papers, and that's when everything hit me like a ton of bricks. And that's when I started to like feel like, okay, I've got to find some way to get out of this. I got to get away from all this pain, all this misery. And guess what? You can't get away from it. I mean, you carry it with you no matter what you do or where you go. I mean, I had this half-baked notion that I was going to move up to Astoria, Oregon and become a postal worker. I started looking at some other things. And in the end, I was like, okay, I'm not going to do those things. But then I was still like, I'm still feeling miserable. So I decided my solution was to leave the job. So I left the job. Why am I sharing all this with you? Because hey, I have no problem admitting my own mistakes and fallibilities, and I don't have any problem like with you guys seeing that, because it's a good illustrative lesson. Don't make Taylor's mistakes, and I think that's important sometimes to acknowledge and be aware of. But also because I think if we're going, my pivotal lesson was earlier this week around this. I'm driving around again doing DoorDash, and I'm like, I'm just feeling as miserable as before. And I stopped myself and I said, well, then you have to do something different. It's not about getting away from your misery. It's about doing something different. What is it? And I realized I needed to accept what I was feeling, not fight it, not push it away, not try to escape. I had to really just be present with it. And so I just accepted it. And lo and behold, I actually found a level of peace and contentment with it, because I wasn't trying to fight it. I wasn't trying to get away from it. Instead, I was just like, yeah, here I am. And some days were easier than others. Some days were harder. Today's kind of a medium day. The realization I came away with is really that I am starting to feel like myself a bit more. I've been a bit more productive writing wise. I've been starting to feel more focused on things, so that's good. That tells me that there is an end in sight to this crazy experience. But what I realized was that fundamentally, I'm probably going to be waking up miserable and sad and depressed for a while. And I'm just going to have to get through it each day, regardless of what I'm doing, whether I'm doing customer support, whether I'm doing DoorDash, whether I'm doing a Amazon delivery driving service or a courier service or whatever it is that I'm doing. I'm just going to have to work through it. The other day I had someone ask me, like, how do you get through this stuff as quickly as possible? And I thought it was an interesting response, and I could empathize with that person. And I said, you don't. And I realized that from like 2017, 2018. I didn't. I mean, I woke up in fear every single freaking day. I didn't get through it quickly. I just had to just live with it for a while. And some days were easier and some days were harder. And it's the same thing with this. And I come back to this lesson and I'm like, well, that's how you accept it then. You accept that you're feeling the way that you are. Unfortunately, we live, at least in the US, in a culture of you have to get away from the things that you don't like. You have to escape from the feelings that are uncomfortable. You have to try and do your best to somehow or another numb what you're feeling. And I mean, I've done all kinds of things to numb myself over the years. I mean, I used to cut myself. Um, I mean, I've had tons of sex and used sex for that purpose. Um, I've never been an alcoholic or a drug addict, and I'm not going to go down that route because it's not. I know that's not helpful, and I've seen the effects of that because my dad was an alcoholic. But I definitely know what it's like to try and numb things. I mean, I've sometimes I've even used magical work for that purpose. And I think in some ways it's kind of an explanation for my intensity. Like I am an intense person, but that intensity in some ways is driven by some of the things that I've done to try and get away from what's going on inside me. Um, and I can't do it anymore. I realize that it's just like I can't do this. This doesn't work. And it's really a sign of what I would consider to be my codependent behavior. I was saying last week how I've been reading this book on codependency. I finished reading it, and it was really good. I mean, it really helped me see some behaviors in myself in a different way. Like, why do I behave certain ways? Why do I make the choices that I make? And I'm like, huh. A lot of this stems from an abusive childhood. A lot of it stems from just all the things that I went through and how I tried to get away from those things. Well, I've never been able to get away from those things. They're a part of my life. They're not going to go away. I have to come to some kind of understanding with them, and I have over the years. I'm not, I mean, I'm probably I'm probably more well adjusted than most people might think. Um, all things considered, I think the reason I'm not so much right now is because again, I just went through a very painful divorce. I think I went kind of through one of the more painful types of divorce because I mean I'm still in love with the person and she still loves me. How do you even possibly work through something like that where you're like, I still love the person and I would still try if it wasn't for X, Y, and Z. Now, I mean, as I get further away, I do see the codependency in that relationship, and I see where things were unhealthy, certainly on my end. How I was saying yes to certain things that I shouldn't have said yes to, how I wasn't necessarily having good boundaries for myself, and also I think in relationship to the ex that there were certain things too. But again, that's her journey to discover, not mine, and I'm certainly not going to speak to it because I mean that could be me projecting onto her, and that's not fair to her. Um, you know, I got to stick to my own business, not someone else's. But it really stands out to me that like if I am going to move forward with this work of my life, that I have to be able to get clear on these things and I have to get to a place where I can accept and work through the uncomfortable feelings. And sometimes that really just involves simply being present with them, not trying to do something with them, which so often is what people do. I got to do something about it. Well, what about just being with it? What about just allowing yourself to be with it? I was reading earlier this week, they had a daily Stoic entry about emotions, actually, and they were talking about how Marcus Aurelius, when he discovered that one of his tutors died, he lay in bed, and one of the servants was trying to get him out of bed, and the emperor at the time said, "No, just leave him, let him be, let him just be, and let him grieve." Now, most people, when they think of Stoicism, they think that there's a stereotype that the Stoics don't feel. That's not the case. The Stoics would say you can feel emotions, you can acknowledge things. We just don't want to let our emotions control us. Well, I'll admit I have definitely allowed my emotions to control me a lot of times, and that's a deeply, which I do. I mean, I really feel emotions deeply, It's one of the reasons I'm so intense. It's not a bad thing in some ways, but in some ways it is. I mean, I honestly don't envy anybody who decides to get on this particular ride, because let's be honest here, as much fun as I can be, there's also that aspect of intensity that comes with, like, can you really handle the intensity and the depth that you're going to get with me? And I don't think just anybody could. I think that, and I wouldn't ask that of anyone really, but it's like, if you want to take this ride, be prepared for that, because that's what you get. You don't, that's what you get. You get me. And me is a deep, intense, driven person on many different levels. And that can be a hard thing to live with or experience or be involved with if it's not something you're ready for. Not that you should necessarily even have to be ready for it. I mean, maybe, by doing all this work that I'm doing right now, it won't be so hard to be, and maybe I'm being too hard on myself. I don't know. I just know that really at the end of the day, like, this is why I'm doing the work, and why I'm glad that, like, really, for the most part, I'm just sticking to myself and taking care of me, and figuring these things out. And so my lesson really is, be present with yourself. Be present with your emotions. When you're feeling miserable, then just be with that emotion. You don't have to do something about it all the time. You don't have to fix it or solve it or anything else. And maybe if you're just present with it and comfortable with it, and just allow yourself to be with it, it'll actually get to a point in your day where you will feel better. That's what I found each day this week. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I need to remember, so that whatever I end up doing in the short term over the next 3 to 4 years, in order to pay the bills while I continue to write and while I explore a possible master's degree in counseling. Yeah, that's something I'm going to be possibly exploring. We'll see. I'm thinking about it a little more. I thought it was only going to be a 2-year program, and then I realized, oh, wait a minute, these are 3-year programs. Do I really want to do this? Like, I don't know. Have to think about that one a bit more. But, that's okay. I've got plenty of time to think about it. That's one of the reasons why I'm glad I can't get into it right away. I have to actually wait a year. So where am I going with this? When you feel fear or depression or sadness or unhappiness or whatever you feel, it is okay to simply feel it and acknowledge it. You don't have to solve it. You won't necessarily solve it. And if you can let that go, that need to solve something, and just be present with it, that's when you're going to discover who you really are as well, because you're going to stop running away from yourself. I think that, part of why I'm starting to come back to myself more is I'm not running from myself. I'm not running from the pain that I'm feeling. I'm not running from the sadness and the depression and the misery. I'm starting to just be like, okay, this is where I'm at. I have to accept it. But in accepting it, and really just accepting it in my heart and working with it in my heart and with the entirety of my being, I'm also gradually feeling it perhaps begin to fall away, because I am feeling more focused. I am feeling like I want to write more. I am feeling moments and glimmers of happiness. So I'm just going to stick with it, do the best I can, and just continue moving forward, and somehow or another get my life back together to some semblance of togetherness beyond what it is right now. I mean, I actually have made some progress, so I'm going to get there. It's just going to take some time. And I'm also realizing that, and I think this is important, is that sometimes you have to allow yourself grace, and be okay with the fact that you're going to make some mistakes when you're in a period of suffering. Your suffering's caused by you, and you're going to, we're not all Buddhists. We're not going to all necessarily do things the right way. Although I suspect a Buddhist would tell me that, they don't always handle suffering and misery all that well either. But, point being, like, Like, I'm giving myself some grace right now. I had a realization the other day that, like, if ever there was a time for me to be making mistakes, right now is it, when it has like little to no impact on other people. Because the thing is that, like, I don't really have anyone in my life right now. I'm living with somebody, um, but I don't have anyone that I'm like too seriously involved. There's someone that's recently come into my life that I'm excited. I mean, I didn't expect it, but even that person lives a couple hours away, so it's not like I get to see that person all that often. And I don't and I'm leaving that be very free form because I don't know what's going to happen, because there's a lot of stuff going on in that person's life too, and I don't want to get too attached right now when I'm already so hurt by other things that, like, getting too attached would just not be a good thing for me. But at the same time, I'm open to just sort of seeing where things go and letting things happen organically. But even so, like right now, like I have minimal impact on anyone else. Like I can totally screw my own life up and it doesn't hurt anyone other than me. And granted, I don't want to screw my life up if I can help it. I really kind of just want to get things stabilized and back together again in my head and my heart and in my mundane life. And I have taken some steps in that direction, but it's just been harder than I thought. I don't think people realize like what happens when you have to reinvent your life from scratch, just how much work is involved. But I'm getting there. I'm just going to take my time. Anyway, thanks for watching. Those of you who chose to watch, and I don't know if this helped you or not, but that's kind of what I had to share with you this week. So take care.